This is the Patriots Catch-22 podcast with Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I'm Evan Lazar. Evan Lazar.
Hello, everybody.
Nailed it. Joined as always by our Barth. That's a fit. That's a match. No risk it, no biscuit.
22.
Here is Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
We lived it tough in the 90s. Us 90s babies.
Oh, yeah.
It was tough.
Real tough.
I was 3 years old, but it was still
Only
tough.
got to see one Super Bowl appearance.
Everybody keeps telling me that the 90s were the toughest time to be a Boston sports fan.
I mean, yeah,
No-
technically.
No titles, Super Bowl appearance. Red Sox choked, right? That was that team, the 96 team or something like that, 98, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Toughest time. All right. Anyways, Evan Lazar, Alex Barth, Patriots Catch-22 with you on Tuesday this morning because, as we do this time of year, vacations, things like that, just moving the schedule around a little bit to accommodate. So we might be on Tuesday next week, too, because we have July 4th on Thursday. So we might have to move around next week as well. And then the following week, I'll be on vacay. So we're gonna keep it going, but it might be a little bit different in terms of times and things like that, so just be mindful of that. And obviously you can listen to the podcast as a podcast. If you missed it live, you can always do that too, wherever you get your podcast. That was a nice plug right there. So
Very nice.
just go ahead and leave us a review, only if it's going to be positive though. Don't be leaving us any negative reviews. And
Well, we can do that thing every podcast does, where if you leave a 5-star review and you either ask us a question or just say something funny, we'll read our favorites on the air.
there you go.
But it has to be a 5-star review.
It has to be 5 stars. I don't want to see any of those negative reviews under our show
Big
because
whoop. Want to fight about it?
because I know all of you love us. So don't be
Right.
doing that. Before we get rolling here, we do have some Patriots news to talk about. Last week we were right off the air, a couple hours, and Rhamondre Stevenson officially signed his contract extension, so we'll get to that. We might have a small, nothing, just a little tease, but nothing major. Don't get carried away. But maybe have a little small Patriots training camp announcement here as well coming up on the show. So we'll get to that when that hits the Twitter, the X machine. But before we get rolling here, hey Patriots fans, if you want to see Toyota's best offers, including those not seen on TV, go to buyatoyota.com. It's Toyota's official website for deals from the official vehicle of the New England Patriots. Toyota, let's go places, and easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. So I want to start with the Rhamondre Stevenson extension, since that's the news, and we weren't on the air for that, or we did our show before that came out, I should say. And you know me, Alex. This is difficult for me because I am the analytics nerd in me, and the reporter in me, and the football film junkie in me are all at odds on this one. The analytics nerd with me on Rhamondre Stevenson is telling me, warning, right? Don't give
Right.
running backs second contracts. Don't give 26-year-old running back $17 million guaranteed. Don't give a running back that last year saw his yards per carry average drop a full yard and his yards after contact average drop a full yard from his breakout season 2 years ago. This is typically something that I would label bad business. There's just no way around it because you don't do this. You don't give running backs second contracts. With that being said, I want to be fair. If this was Bill, I would be saying that this is a bad deal. I would. I'd be saying this is a bad deal. You don't do this with running backs. What they did with running...
I don't think Bill would have done this, too.
No.
I think this is a sign of changing times, because Bill just never paid running backs. They're not early down backs. He paid, like, the James Whites and the
What Bill
Kevin
would have
Fox.
done, and I know we shouldn't keep doing that, but what Bill would have done in my mind, and I think you're getting at it too, is Bill would have just drafted his replacement, just like he did with Rhamondre Stevenson with Damian Harris, right?
And next year
Sony
looks like an
Michel.
excellent year for running backs in the draft. We're a year out, so you never know, especially at that position. But next year looks to be a really strong year for running backs in the draft, for whatever that's worth.
Right. So it's tough to look at this deal as somebody that gets thrown data at them by the nerds, the people that you hate, constantly saying, beware, buyer beware on running backs. Buyer beware on running backs. The best thing to do with running backs is to use them up in 4 years and then recycle and go back into the draft and take somebody else and keep on keeping on that way. But the other side of it, and that's where I'm at, 90%, right? Is I think that this is going to be a risky contract. The other side of it for the Patriots, though, is that they are clearly trying to establish a culture of draft, develop, retain. And the guys that they feel like have developed and done things the right way and gone about their business correctly are the ones that they have given contracts to. Rhamondre Stevenson, Christian Barmore, Mike Onwenu, Kyle Duggar. So they're trying to set a new precedent. They're trying to set a new culture that Christian Gonzalez, if you play your butt off and you do the right things, we will give you that $80 million contract when the time comes. Whoever, name player, it's kind of probably too early to talk about the rookies this year.
Right.
But this applies to basically anybody that's still on the team from the 2022 draft and on. So I hear what they're doing. I see what they're doing with this. But at the same time, I can't deny that whenever you invest in the running back position into their late 20s, which is where Rhamondre Stevenson will be in this 4-year window here, it's a risk. And on top of all of that, you look at what he was last year with that contract. Last year, we can sit here and say, well, it was a product of the blocking in front of him that his numbers declined. But if you're going to sit there and say it's part of the problem was the blocking, then you're kind of making my point. Because if the blocking improves, then any runner is going to gain more yards, right?
Well, that's not. Some runners will gain more yards than others. Any running back is going to be better with better blocking in front of him. I don't think you can, sorry, you can finish your take. I just,
this is
go ahead. LaDainian, same offensive line, and this is obviously extreme, but this is where I think people start to get too carried away with that conversation. Same offensive line. LaDainian Tomlinson's running for more yards than Sean Green.
Yeah, but
no, you shouldn't need to think about that. Yes, he is.
We got the little bit of break.
Oh, yeah.
But
okay.
We'll get to it in a second. Sure, obviously, but Rhamondre Stevenson's not LaDainian Tomlinson either.
Right, but the next guy you're bringing in may not be Sean Green. My point is it's a little extreme to say, well, if the offensive, it's not. There are certain running backs that I think can, and this gets away from my take on it because I'm going in a different direction, but as a whole, there are certain running backs that can elevate. You can't entirely deny that, and maybe they believe Stevenson can be that guy. They paid him kind of on the fringe of being one of those guys.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I don't think it's as simple as, well, if they improved the offensive line, the running back would be fine whoever they have back there. I don't think it's quite that simple.
That's fair, but do you feel like Rhamondre Stevenson is truly one of those guys that is adding yards above what is there in terms of the blocking and all that kind of stuff? Because that's what the problem is that what we find is that, I don't know, I don't want to put a percentage on it because I don't know the exact number, but a very high number of running backs are simply just a product of their environment. And there's maybe a handful of running backs that add significant value to what is his environment.
Yeah,
I
don't know that you need to be great to do that, though. Like, there's other ways. He's a well-rounded player. He can catch the football. I'll take a power back, especially with the new rules, over a smaller back any day at 225. He's going to have an opportunity to get hidden yardage so those can't. But I guess if I can just drop my take in here. Here's where I'm at. You asked, do I think he's one of those guys? I think he can be at times, certainly, but they didn't pay him like one. I know I said they sort of fringy did, but yeah, they kind of did on the fringe. They didn't really aggressively pay him like one. The whole $36 million, you can't look at that number. If he makes the $36 million, which is the total value of the contract, that means he ran, I think it's 1,200 yards is the marker. He ran for 1,200 yards every year, all 4 years, and he was an all-pro every year, all 4 years. If he does that, yeah, he's worth $36 million over 4 years. Absolutely he is. He's not going to do that. He's not going to get all that money. This is why I can't get worked up about it. The guarantee money comes out to about $4.5 a year. Also, people point to the 4 years being long for a running back. How long have we been doing this? We know how these contracts work. There's 2 years. I'm sure
it's a 2-year deal.
It's a 2-year. Maybe there's some guaranteed money in the third year, but it'll be an easy out. Okay. So this should not, at the end of the day, they were going to need another running back. We can debate the merit of should they have gone back, should they have just let him walk, gone to the draft, and Antonio Gibson and a rookie become the two guys. We can debate that, and there's a case to be made there. But they didn't exactly give him the Saquon Barkley contract. This should not prevent them from, because I see people be like, why wouldn't you spend that money on a tackle? Why wouldn't you spend it on a wide receiver? Why wouldn't you're going to have to pay Drake May eventually? No, if this prevents them from doing any of that, there is a bigger problem than simply the contract. Because this is again, 4.5 a year. He's the 7th highest paid running back in football. And by the way, that's based on this year's standards. The extension doesn't kick in until next year. He's going to play this year under the last year of his rookie deal. By the time the extension kicks in, there's a chance he's outside the top 10 highest paid running backs in football. That's why I can't get worked up about this.
I'm not worked up about it.
It doesn't prevent them from making any further moves. The only thing...
But when you say that, though, it doesn't prevent them from making any further moves.
Shouldn't prevent them from making...
Is, I think, a better way of putting that.
But
because,
4.5 shouldn't...
But it's not about the cap, though. It's not about
I guess.
the cap.
Well, they were on schedule to be 30th in cash spending in 2025.
Yeah.
So it really is a drop in the bucket. The only thing it truly takes out of the equation to me, and again, this is if you want to have this conversation, we can have it, and I've gone back and forth on this since they signed it. Would you rather, and this is not because of the money, this is just because of the player, would you rather have them maybe gotten a little more aggressive at the top of the 2025 draft for a guy like an Ollie Gordon or a Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins? And really, there should be, the anti-running back people should be happy about this because now they're not going to burn, they don't have to burn one of those picks on a running back. Now you can go receiver, tackle, edge, top 100 next year and be set.
But I still wouldn't argue to burn a high pick on a running back regardless.
Okay, but it would have been more of a conversation. Or maybe they don't need to use one on a running back at all.
It would have been more of a conversation.
And the other thing is, I don't know. I said this yesterday, and I feel like it's a stupid take, but I'm going to give it anyway because I feel like this. When's the last time? It all comes down to what you think of Rhamondre Stevenson. If you don't like Rhamondre Stevenson, if you don't think he's a good player, if you're worried about his injury concerns, then yeah, it's a bad contract. But if you're sitting there saying, I like Rhamondre Stevenson, I don't know with how much they paid him. When is the last time across the league, Evan, that a guy was given an extension, played well, and we sat here going, yeah, he's giving them something, but man, at that price point, that's a bit much.
Yeah, but that's if he plays well.
Right, but here's my point. The way these contracts explode, and by the way, the league, we know they want to go to 18 games at some point. That's going to supercharge the cap again. Contracts are going to get even bigger. There's no world in which Rhamondre Stevenson plays well and you go back to this contract and it being bad value. It just comes down to, do you think Rhamondre Stevenson can play or not? I think he can play. So I'm fine with it because I don't think we're going to be ruining $4.5 million a year. I don't.
Well, it's not $4.5 million a year,
or
though.
Whatever.
So it's what I'm assuming, and we don't know the structure of the cash flow yet, but what I'm assuming is that this is really like a 2.5-year extension disguised as a 4-year extension. So you're going to look at, he's under contract for this coming up season. So it doesn't kick in until 2025. So what you're really looking at is it's a 2-year, $17 million contract. So you're paying Rhamondre Stevenson, what was that, $8.5 million over the
yeah.
First 2
I
years
just
of the
don't think we're
extension.
going to look back regretting the $8.5 million, the 3% of the salary cap that Rhamondre Stevenson is getting.
No, but you still. It's
assuming he plays well. But you know what?
It's the same conversation that we have with somebody like Juju, where in the grand scheme of things, Juju Smith-Schuster is making middling wide receiver money in the grand scheme of things. But he stunk.
Okay.
So that $12 million on the cap now becomes a much bigger deal than it would have if Juju Smith-Schuster was just what he was supposed to be, which was league average. It's not necessarily... I understand what you're saying in the big picture sense of things, but I also just think that you need to evaluate things within a vacuum of this player. Is he worth this amount of money? And
I think that's all fallacy to an extent. I mean, look, if they'd given him the Barkley contract, that's another conversation. But I think for what they gave him...
You knew I wasn't going to like paying a running back. You had to have known that.
He's not even going to be one of the 10 high... He's making less than Bijan Robinson, who's on a rookie deal. And I know they weren't going to take a running back in the 7th round. or is 7th overall. But, like, it's not – they didn't pay him. They paid him, but they didn't pay him. He's still a relatively young guy.
It's a decent running back contract.
I don't think he's going to be a top 10 highest paid running back by the time this thing kicks in.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I would have to look at the guys that are up. But I just think the biggest thing to me is that you have to think that 2 years ago, his 2022 season, that's going to be the guy that you're going to get for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
To make this worth it.
Yeah, I'm okay betting on that. And you know what? I'm okay betting on that because, again, the other option, do you want to go into the draft? You don't want them to have running backs. You don't want them to pay them. You don't want them to draft them high. You want them to take a guy in the 7th round and for him to run for 2.3 yards per carry because you'd rather they never run the ball ever because that's what the nerd math tells you. Evan, they are going to run the ball. They need a good running back.
I would rather them – okay, but I hear you, and I agree that they're going to run the ball. But, again – I go back to what I keep telling you, and I knew we were going to be at odds at this.
And by the way, here's behind him who's going to need a new contract the next couple of years. Okay. Jahmyr Gibbs.
Jahmyr Gibbs is a second-year player. He's not getting a new contract for 3 years.
He might get it after
year 3.
Oh, year 3. Okay, you're right. I did my math wrong on that. Travis Etienne.
Oh my God, he's not. Travis Etienne's not getting $17 million guaranteed.
Might.
No, he's not.
He might. He's a decent player.
He was hurt his entire rookie season.
I mean, Breece Hall, we'll see with the injury. Kenneth Walker's going to get paid. Kenneth Walker's a good player.
I'll give you this. The running back market in free agency last year was more lucrative than it has been in years past. It had a little bit of a renaissance there with the running back market in free agency last year. So maybe they look at it and they think that's a trend.
So that's my other point.
That's going.
If they were going to pay, let's take the if out of it. Let's say they went in to this offseason and said, we are extending Rhamondre Stevenson. Yeah. Let's take that conversation of should they or should they not have out of it for a second. This was the time to do it. Because if you looked at the free agent running backs next year, stinks. Terrible market. His value is only going to go up. Even if he had an okay year, his value is only going to go up. So paying him now versus waiting, good call.
Now, he looked great in the spring for what it's worth because it's not pads and they're not actually running the ball, but he looked great in the spring, so I'm optimistic about that. The biggest thing, and then we don't have to belabor the point, the biggest thing that I'm worried about with Rhamondre is that if the offensive line doesn't improve, which I'll get to in a second, there are people that think that it's definitely not going to improve, as we've talked about in the past. His 2023 season was a steep decline from his 2022. And the one thing that you can really point to with that is that he wasn't breaking tackles. He wasn't creating yards after contact at the same rate that he was the year prior. It's about a full yard, which is the difference in his overall rushing average. In terms of, I think he was 3.8 in 2022, which was near the top of the league. And then last year he was 2.8, which was near the bottom of the league.
Well, there's also an element of I think teams were selling out more against the run.
Maybe teams are selling out. Maybe he was getting contacted earlier. You know, there are some data that backs this up that he was not getting to top speed as often. And the slower that you are coming through the line of scrimmage, the harder it is going to be to shake off tacklers. That's obvious. There are some elements of his game that I think warrant the contract, certainly. His receiving ability, which Mike Reese put in his notes this week, was a reason why they felt comfortable doing this, was the upgrade in receiving ability. But you really have to hope that he's the guy that he was in 2022. Otherwise, they're going to have an overpay on their salary. They just are. Now, I like Rhamondre. This is why I told you earlier that the film junkie and reporter side of me is on conflict with the nerd here, because you watch him on film. He's a productive player for the most part. He does multiple things well, and he's a really, really good ball carrier most of the time. And then you look at him as from the reporter side of things, he's always been a good pro. He's a good guy. I've enjoyed covering him. There's a lot of positive angles about him as a person, I think, that have boded well for them in terms of this contract. And that's an angle of this as well that I think has to go can't go unsaid, because they're clearly trying to build a certain culture within the locker room. And I do feel like he's one of those guys that fits the good
All right.
side of things.
So everything you tell me, you watch it on tape, he's a good player.
Yes.
You see him interacting in the locker room, he's a good player.
Yes.
But the data suggests, what do your eyes tell you? Good player, yes or no?
Good player on the decline. That's what they tell me. Because if you add it up between his
take
last
the
year,
imaginary numbers out of it.
well, it's not imaginary though.
Good player,
I'm
yes
not making
or no?
up imaginary numbers.
Good play.
You
just
last week you told me that receivers drop off at 30.
Yeah.
Right? And you had your data to back it
Running
up.
backs drop off at 28.
28.
All right, he's 26.
He's 26. He's going into his age 26 season.
Right. So
he already showed some decline last year.
you're going to get 26, 27, 28, and then you get out of the contract. That's exactly what we're talking about here.
I hope so. If that's the way if that's true and that's the way the cash flow really works out, then you're going to be right. They'll be able to get out of it. And I hate talking like this because I don't want it to sound like I'm killing Rhamondre, because I understand all the things that you're saying, and I do think that he's a good guy and a good teammate, a good player, all those things. I always will worry about paying the second contract on a running back. Always.
I get that, but I'm saying as far as it goes, the risk here is so minimal. So minimal. They didn't pay him a ton of money. We both think they'll probably be able to get out of it relatively early. Like, I'm not sitting here saying, what a brilliant move. Oh, my God. I'm just sitting here saying, like, I don't know. I don't think there's a ton of downside to it. I don't think there's a point we end up regretting this contract.
Do you regret Juju?
I regret Juju in the sense that,
because that's the downside.
I think it's much easier. But Juju, you can't. It's like $9 million in dead cap on that.
There will be in the beginning of Rhamondre's deal. If Rhamondre has the same exact season this year that he had last year.
Well, so this is. Let me make one.
You have to bank. You have to bank. You're banking, and I'm not saying you. I'm just more. They are banking on the fact that he's going to give them really 3 more productive years. Because the extension doesn't kick in this year, so you're really talking about 3 more seasons where they feel like Rhamondre Stevenson is going to be worth the money.
So this is. Let me add this one take on it then. How many times the last 2 years, 3 years, have you heard me? Yeah, really 2 years, I guess. Go on and on and on about how they need to stop running him into the ground. They need to give other running backs touches. He's doing too much, and the whole thing about, well, yeah, he's good now, but when you get to December and you need him, and what's happened every year? They run him into the ground, and he's toast by the end of the year. He's top 10 in touches. You're going to get more out of him using him a little less. And that's nothing against him. That's all of these backs that finish the year top 10 in touches, look at their numbers in December and January. They're never good. That's why the Titans always struggled with Derrick Henry. That's why part of the reason the Cowboys struggled to get over the top with Zeke, because they would just grind these guys into the ground, and that was it. So this is where a guy like Antonio Gibson and a new coaching staff with a new approach, let's lessen the – I know they just paid him, and this is going to sound counterproductive, but lessen the workload a little bit, and I think you're going to get more bang for your buck. He may run – let's say he, call it 4.5 yards a carry. I'd rather it be – or let's say he runs for 1,000 yards. If it's a few less yards but more yards per carry and you're getting capable play from Antonio Gibson, that's a much better way to do it. So I do think there is an element of protect your investment. I think it's different from Juju because Juju had a bad knee, and they should have figured that out, or maybe it snuck up on him. I don't know. As far as we know, Rhamondre Stevenson's healthy. He's told us he's healthy. I know he hurt his ankle last year, but he was a full participant in the spring. Juju wasn't last year. He didn't participate in the spring. I think he's healthy. If he's healthy, and they, with this system, they tweak the offensive line, which you're a big believer in. Scott Peters is going to figure it out. I do think they get, 1, 2, 2.5 solid, I don't know about all pro, but solid years out of him. And if you get that, great. Solid contract.
All right. Fair enough. I'm all, me. I'm going to repeat it. I'm always going to be wary of running backs. Big investment at running backs.
Say
I'm
that,
always going to be wary of it.
But you can't, you say that, and then we'd be here in the spring
Yes.
And I'd be saying we need to consider some of these day 2 running backs.
I would
and
take
you'd
a
be
running back
pitching a
on.
fit.
I would be.
No, you'd be. Evan,
Not with their first 2 picks.
You-
If they want to pick a running back in the 3rd or 4th round, that's fine.
you refused to talk about Donovan Edwards last year.
Yeah, because that would have been ridiculous to do that last year.
You wouldn't even talk about him as a player. Forget in reference to the Patriots.
Yeah, because it'd be ridiculous for them to take a running back last year.
Not in. I'm saying in the context of the NFL, you refuse to talk about
that's not
Donovan
true.
Edwards.
It
was 100% true.
No, it wasn't.
We can pull the tape on that.
You can if you want. I refuse to talk about running backs for the Patriots because when you have needs at
refuse to talk
quarterback,
about-
wide receiver, left tackle, and you want to talk to me about taking a running back with one of your first 4 picks, no.
And sorry,
I'm
not
doing
Donovan
that.
Edwards, Blake Corum. No,
I'm
Do
not
you
doing
remember?
that. How high did Blake Corum end up going?
I'm a top 100.
Exactly. So what are we talking?
Evan,
Like, what a
I
waste
said
of a
on
pick
here.
that would have been.
No, we were doing our
That would've-
positional thing. No.
You can't sit here and say
That's
that's
not what I'm
been a good
saying.
investment.
That's not what I'm saying. We were doing our positional thing, and we got to the running backs, and you're like, we're going to skip the top because the Patriots. And I said, just as a football analyst, having watched these guys.
But this is
this is what I said.
Patriots Catch-22.
I said
I don't got time to talk about football.
No, this show
I
is
don't got time.
educational. We're trying to get people ready for the draft. I said, say one nice thing about Blake Corum, and you could not be bothered to do that. And now you're sitting here telling me that
I don't have anything nice to say about him. He's a 5'8" running back. I hope it works out for him.
he's good.
He's fine. He wasn't even the
Say
first
something
running back.
nice. Say something
He wasn't
nice.
even the first running back off the
That
board.
was incorrect. He was your RB1.
He was.
And you won't say something nice.
He
Say
was.
something nice.
Yeah.
All right, and your promise he's 5'8". Say something nice about Deion Lewis.
I could say a lot of nice things about Deion Lewis, but I think Deion Lewis was a different player.
He's a completely different player, but you just threw out 5'8".
Deion Lewis was a guy, and let's be fair, as good as Deion Lewis was for 3 years, 2 years, whatever it was, his size eventually caught up to him, and he was not a good player when he signed with the Titans on that second contract. He just wasn't. So
Yeah, all right. Well, if you're trying to use that to come back to Rhamondre Stevenson, yeah, Deion Lewis is different. I'd be a lot more hesitant paying Deion Lewis. He weighed 150 pounds.
well, there we go. This is all. It's all the same.
I know you. You would be complaining about having to talk. You may be okay with it, but you would be complaining about having to talk about running backs
In the
during
first 2
draft
rounds, I
if
agree.
they hadn't paid him.
In the first 2 rounds, I agree. But you wouldn't be able to ignore the need at that point. If you all you had under contract going into 2025 was Antonio Gibson, we would have to talk about running backs.
Yeah, but that's my point. It's all you did was, and I know this crawls under people's skin, but we do this with other positions. All you did was give up money. You didn't give up draft capital. All you did was give up money.
It's not nothing. It's not money. Look, I've learned one thing about this team and about other teams in this town.
Yeah.
I won't name names. That all of it is one big pie, right? And whether it's salary,
It's different. It's
you
very
can't-
different
you-
here than the other team you're referencing.
Sure, but you can't. It's not about the salary cap. They have all the salary cap space in the world to spend.
Right.
That is not the problem. The problem is that when you earmark this piece of the pie to Rhamondre Stevenson, now it's a little bit less to give elsewhere. And that type of stuff does end up catching up to them. It does end up mattering. Whether we want to talk about that, have that conversation or not, or be honest about it or not, there's a budget. And eventually the budget runs dry. And they're going to look at it and say, we have too much invested. This is our cap. T. Higgins. We will pay T. Higgins $25 million a year. But if somebody offers him $28 million a year, we're not going to 30. And that's how these things work. And
Okay,
but that's not really the reason why I don't like the contract. But that's just like a side piece of it. The reason why I don't like the contract is because I hate running backs. I hate paying running backs. I hate investing high picks in running backs. I hate all of
boom,
it.
there you go. So no matter what, you were going to hate what they did unless they drafted a guy in the 7th round.
No, if they drafted a guy in the middle rounds, like they did with Rhamondre Stevenson in the first place, and they drafted a guy in the 4th round, like they did with Rhamondre, or the 3rd round, like they did with Damian Harris, then it would have been fine. When they drafted Sony Michel, as much as Sony Michel didn't work out, hello, Matt, as much as Sony Michel didn't work out,
Yeah.
they were in a position as an organization to make luxury draft picks at that point.
Sure. Oh, kind of.
They were. They were.
They weren't. We just didn't know it yet.
They were pushing all in. Thank you, sir. They were pushing all in to maximize Brady's window. We know that. That's what Bill said a million times. So that was fine. But this is a different situation. I hope it works out. And it's not to bag on Rhamondre. I am never going to move on running backs. We are going to argue about this until we're 80 years old, still doing this show probably, and we're going to continue arguing
I
about
think
it.
if you have a super strong feeling about this move, it's so, I don't want to say minor league, but like there's not enough here to get worked up about to me.
Yeah, you just knew I was going to hate the running backs. You knew it.
But somebody has to play running back.
You know what I think the biggest thing...
You just want them to run. You just want them to run 0-1 personnel all the time. Get the running back. You want them to treat running backs like why am I blanking on his name? The coach from Tampa. Like you want them to treat running backs like Bruce Arians treats tight ends. Irrelevant unless you have the greatest of all time.
No, I just am fully aware that, like I said earlier, the vast majority of running backs are replaceable. There's a handful of running backs that I would look at in the grand scheme of things of the NFL that I would say that guy is special. That guy is different from everybody else. You know I love Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
He's at the top of the list.
Different.
He's different.
Yeah.
He's a different kind of cat. That's an offensive weapon. That's a whole different ball game than what we're talking about. If you're on the Christian McCaffrey level, then fine.
But they didn't pay Rhamondre Stevenson like he's one of those guys.
Of course not, because that would be ridiculous. But the point is that every single other running back, for the most part, what we have learned over time is replaceable. No, LaDainian Tomlinson is not replaceable. Christian McCaffrey is not replaceable. I think Rhamondre Stevenson is right on the line. He's right on the line.
All right, so why not see?
We'll see.
Why not see?
We'll see.
Because, I mean, Evan, we both know what a coin flip draft picks are. So if you're going to take the coin flip, I'll pay a little more. And the other thing, it's not $8 million or nothing. Like you have to pay the draft pick too. In reality, is you probably have to have multiple guys. You still have to bring in another veteran on top of that to hedge your bets. I'll pay a little more and find out.
All right. Let's move on to this tiny little bit of breaking news. So the Patriots have officially released their training camp dates. We got all of them all at once. And
is this all of them, or is it just through?
This might be all of the open practice. So there's 13 dates on here. Usually we get 15 practices, but sometimes after the first preseason game, those are closed to the public but open to the media for a couple of extra days. So long story short, you can go on Patriots.com or on our socials and see the entire 13 dates that are available. But a few highlights here. The first training camp practice of the year is July 24th, Wednesday, July 24th at 11 a.m. That's another thing. All these practices are at 11 a.m., which is nice, but also for us it has some downsides too because we'll be here later in the day. But Bill used to do practices 9:15, something around there. So these are a little bit later start to the day. So Wednesday, July 24th is the first day of training camp. A few other highlights. July 28th is a Sunday. There'll be a practice on that day. August 3rd is a Saturday. There'll be a practice on that day. I know a lot of people like those weekends because you don't have to worry about work and camp, school, whatever. So there are a couple of weekend dates. The Eagles joint practices aren't on here yet.
Yeah, it is.
Is it?
Last one on there. It says joint practice with
I didn't see the
13th.
very fine print. So August 13th on Tuesday, August 13th.
The last one.
Well, the very last open practice will be a joint practice with the Philadelphia Eagles. They're only doing one as of right now. This is more anecdotal. I don't think anybody's ever done a study on this.
Yeah.
But the second day of joint practices is when it gets chippy.
Except that one year with the Panthers when it started right away.
Yeah. The first day of joint practices is usually when they lay the groundwork of people getting a little bit chippy.
Right.
The second day of joint practices is usually when you see those brawls and stuff like that. So most coaches, most teams have decided that one is the max. We're going to do one day. We're going to get good days work in, and then that will be it. That'll be a big day. Those are big days for Drake May. Especially to see if he gets a ton of reps that day and he does well with those reps, that's going to go a long way in terms of him starting early on during the regular season. So those are training camp dates. Again, all practices are at 11 a.m. This year. and it starts on July 24th. A Wednesday will be the very first practice of the summer. Keep in mind, just a little inside baseball, those first couple of practices are essentially an extension of OTAs. They're not padded. It's a ramp-up period.
First padded practice is probably going to be Sunday the 28th or Monday the 29th.
I believe it's got to be Monday.
Does it? Okay.
Because it's a 5-day ramp-up period with a mandatory off day, which is Saturday in this case.
I feel like they add a day to that every year.
So it's 5 days. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are the first 3 days that will not be in pads. Then break Saturday, come back Sunday for the 5th day, and then Monday should be the padded day, I believe.
Okay.
You could be right, though. These rules it's always wonky.
It's always weird, right? That's why I said Sunday or Monday. And then, assuming they still do the in-stadium practice.
Yeah.
I would think – so we were talking about this yesterday. It used to always be the end of that first full week, the last practice.
Yes.
Which was always a Friday. They'd always be off that Saturday. This year they're practicing on Saturday. So I don't know if they'll do it Friday night and then practice Saturday, or if they'll just do it Saturday night and still do it to end the week because they're off on Sunday. But I would guess August 2nd, August 3rd probably in there if they do it.
Yes, which will be season ticket holders, Foxborough residents, as it always is. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not confirming anything that they're doing that still, but we believe they probably will. So you'll probably get something about that.
Well, look, I'll say this: if we want to actually, put on the analyst hat for a second on this, there's going to be a kicker competition, and that is don't laugh.
I'm laughing.
Don't laugh. That's the big special teams practice. We always talk about this with sight lines and wind tunnels and things like that. If you're going to have a kicker competition, I'd like to see him kick in the stadium. Now, look, Quinn Nordin's legendary 10-for-10 performance never amounted to
That's
anything.
why I laughed, because let's face it.
Hey,
that was legendary.
We all remember where we were. We all remember where we were when Quinn Nordin went 10 for 10 in the Gillette Stadium in practice.
I'm genuinely curious where the listeners, if they remember where they were.
Do you remember where you were?
There were certain things that
seminal moments in Patriots history. The comeback from down 28-3. Drew Bledsoe coming back in against the Steelers in the AFC Championship. And Quinn Nordin going 10 for 10.
You just put it up there with 28-3.
Yep. The Mac Jones Giants joint practice.
Okay,
we all remember where
that.
we were for that one.
We all remember that one because that was special.
No, I remember
you fought for a second there that Mac Jones was the next Drew Brees.
Actually,
he was out there.
That's
slinging
the same offseason, isn't it? Was Nordin 21 or 22?
Well, 20 would have been closed, right?
20 wasn't 20, right? I was closed.
So it must have been 21.
Yeah, Nordin was 21. That was the same. What?
Wow. What a
training
summer.
camp.
What a summer.
No, I remember we were legitimately walking out of there. I forget who I was talking to, but I was talking to – it might have been Mike back when he actually was intern Mike.
Yeah.
Because he was there that night and saying, injuries aside, is that like the most notable training camp moment we've ever seen? But – it didn't help that, he came back out on the practice fields, couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. But, no, I hope they do it because I'd like to see the kicker. And that usually is not just the evaluating of it in the stadium. That usually is the practice we see the most of the kickers.
Yeah.
So if we're going to get a kicker competition, that could be a big night.
I do wish that they made that practice a little bit more competitive. Not to pick on your kickers, but I'm just talking about offense, defense competitive. Usually it's like an up-tempo walkthrough. Last year it was a little bit more ramped up in terms of the speed of the walkthrough. They were actually they were doing probably like spring OTA pace. They were probably at like 75-80%.
Right. Well, we know too.
That.
We've heard this. It's a procedural practice.
Yes.
Part of the reason they do it right before the first preseason game is like they go through what they want the pregame warm-ups to be. They go through, okay, this is where people are going to stand on the sideline, and this is where this and that. And I think there is. You have to do that stuff eventually. I'm not going to sit here and say it makes all the difference in the world, but at a certain point, guys need to know where to go and when to go there.
Yep, absolutely. All right, 855-PATS-500 is the phone number. webradio@patriots.com is the email address. You can yell at me about Rhamondre Stevenson. You can call in about whatever you want. We're also going to do winners and losers from minicamp in the summer, or in the spring, I should say. We didn't do that last week, so we decided to do that this week. But before we get to that, Sean in Vancouver is, the buttons here are like really little, so I have to make sure I'm hitting the right one. Sean is in Vancouver. What's up, Sean?
Good morning, Alex and Evan.
Hey.
I hope you're doing well.
Thanks.
Now, I don't dislike this Stevenson deal or like it because of Stevenson himself. I just like the plan, and this seems like there's something different, and hopefully it'll work that the Patriots are doing. Like they're building a core with these contracts: Barmore and Duggar and Wenyu, Henry, now Stevenson. I want Judon to be added to that. Now, do you think the Patriots should also add Godshot to that list?
Yeah, it's a good question.
I'll take it up here.
Thanks for the call, Sean. So that was another little bit of news. Devon Godshaw quote tweeting last night about his contract situation. I can read the exact phrasing of the tweet here in 1 second. He says, so basically Devon Godshaw, just to give some background first, Devon Godshaw wants a new contract or wants a sweetener in his deal potentially, but he's a free agent next year. He'll be a free agent next offseason, so he's got one more year on his deal. At the very least, he wants that Stephon Gilmore, Matthew Judon, here's a couple extra million bucks for you to show up sort of thing. But I also would think that he wants an extra year or two tacked onto the deal if possible as well to give him an extension. Hopefully, this is Devon Godshaw now. Hopefully we can get something done that's fair to me and my team before camp starts. I love New England. I would love to retire here, but it has to make sense for us. What I do on the football field in the trenches most of time doesn't show on the stat sheet, but turn on the film, you'll see it if you know ball, which we do on this show. We know ball. I would love to finish my career here in New England, but it has to make sense for me and my team. So he feels as though he is owed some more money. Now, I don't necessarily think he's owed more money in 2024. I think he's around $9-ish million, I want to say, in total cash this year, which for a 2-down run-stuffing nose tackle is a pretty good deal. Now, let's be fair to Devon Godshaw. He's right. There's a lot of things that he does on the film that don't show up in the stat sheet. We knew this for years with Vince Wilfork. He's not Vince Wilfork, but it's a similar conversation where when you're a true 3-4-0 technique nose tackle, you're not going to put up crazy stats. You're not going to be somebody that's going to have Aaron Donald-like numbers. You're going to eat up space. You're going to take on blockers. You're going to clog the middle of the field against the run, and you're going to do that sort of thing, and you're going to hold the point of attack. He definitely does all that stuff at a pretty good level. He's not Vince, but it's at a high level, I would say. So the question is twofold to me. One, if you just start handing out bonuses to every single person that whines about their contract, then all 53 guys are going to be coming to Elliot Wolf's office and saying, "Where's mine?" So at some point you have to draw a line. You can't be that team that's just constantly handing out free money, right?
Right.
The second thing is that, like I said, in my mind, for this season, 2024, Devon Godshaw is fairly compensated for his skill set because he's not a 3-down player. He's not a pass rusher. So he's coming off the field in 3rd down, 2-minute, any sort of obvious passing situation, he's not going to be out there. That's when the Barmores, the Equales, the Wattses, that's when those guys go to work. So he's a 2-down run-stuffing nose tackle that is making $9 million and change, I think it is, in 2024, that wants a new contract. If I'm the Patriots, as much as again, this is, reporter side of me is like, good guy, good dude, don't mean to be a meanie. I would probably say to Devon Godshaw, the comps, you're getting paid top of the market in terms of the comps here. I wouldn't budge on this one, personally.
Is he getting paid top of the market?
For his skill set, I think so.
Okay. I mean, it's tough to, to go by total value when he's in the last year of his deal. It's kind of tough. When you go by AAV, he's down there. I mean, this is all interior defensive lineman, but, he's – oh, wait, here we go. Hang on. 2024. He is, in terms of cash, the 7th highest paid defensive tackle in terms of cap number, because that's just the other thing I can sort by. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15th highest cap number for interior defensive lineman.
What's the cash?
So this says cash spent. I don't know if that's what he's made so far, what's due. It says 8.3.
Okay, so that's probably his cash this year. If he added value as a pass rusher, I would say he probably has a gripe here. Yeah. But if you look at the interior defensive line market, I know it's exploded, and they just gave Christian.
Oh wait, so I'm sorry, his cap number is much lower. I was looking at or it's
Jesus Christ.
No, I got his cap number is 11.8. 11.8.
His cap number is.
Yeah, his cash spend is 8.3.
Okay, so he's owed 11.8 here, 7.1 and 5 in base. Okay, so he's not Christian Barmore.
No.
He's not Dexter Lawrence. Those guys put up pressure stats. Like, those guys rush the passer. Those guys have double-digit sacks in Christian Barmore's case last year. Devon Godchaux is what he is. He's a space-eating nose tackle. And that's not to look down on those types of players. But those types of players just don't have a ton of value. We've seen that in the draft even, that those guys don't get drafted high anymore. You have to be truly a dominant player.
T'Vondre Sweat.
In that skill set to even touch the top 100 nowadays. I mean, we've talked about other guys.
He's 35 in cash spent, Devon Godchaux.
We've talked about other guys sort of not exactly one for one in this mold, but in similar molds that we thought are really decent football players that go in late day 3 just because of the nature of the position. So I find it hard. I would love to know, and this is not even throwing any bows, I would just love to know what's his comp. Like, this player X is what I think I'm worth because he does the same things that I do.
You want me to roll off some of the names that are being paid more than him? So I'm going up. So he's whatever I just said, 20, 30, whatever. I'm going up one at a time. David Onyemata from the Falcons.
Yep.
Malik Collins from the Niners. Zach Seiler from the Dolphins. Bilal Nichols from the Cardinals. Byron Murphy from the Seahawks. Larry Ogunjobi from the Steelers. Devon Hamilton from the Jaguars, DJ Jones from the Broncos, DJ Reader from the Lions.
So are you going up or down?
These guys making more money.
Okay.
Anybody stand out to you as a comp so far?
Nope.
Okay. Draymond Jones from the Seahawks. Dalvin Tomlinson is kind of in that mold. So Dalvin Tomlinson is due $11.5 million this year.
Okay. But Devon Godchaux also got the signing bonus when he signed the contract, right?
And also Dalvin Tomlinson. Oh, no, they're the same age. Okay. Justin Jones from the Cardinals. Sheldon Rankins from the Bengals. Grover Stewart from the Colts. Eric Armstead from the Jaguars. Zach Allen from the Broncos. Now we get into kind of this upper tier. Jonathan Allen from the Commanders. Quentin Williams from the Jets. Ed Oliver.
Right, he's not.
Javon Hargrave. Cameron Hayward. I mean, Vita Vea, but Vita Vea does rush to the passer.
Vita Vea is Devon what
the apex
ceiling
of that,
that skill set is.
Deron Payne, Grady Jarrett, Kenny Clark, kind of same thing. Jeffrey Simmons, Dexter Lawrence, Barmore, DeForest Buckner, Derek Brown, Leonard Williams, Christian Wilkins, Justin Madubuike, Chris Jones.
Right. So I mean, how do you feel about it? Because I just feel as though the buck has to stop at some point.
Right.
You can't just be handing out free money to everybody.
The difference between you mentioned the Matthew Judon, Stephon Gilmore deals, and those were borrowing money from the future and putting it up to now. You can't do that with Devon Godchaux because he's in the last year of his deal. He has this is according to Over the Cap, and I always get nervous talking about the cap. If I'm wrong, Miguel, I'm sorry. But he has $1 million in per game roster bonuses. If you just guarantee some of that, you move him up to about where Dalvin Tomlinson is at that $11 million.
Yeah.
That should be enough. I don't know that I'm adding years for a 30-year-old nose tackle.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm totally restructuring the deal. If they just – because with a guy like him that's 30, he doesn't – a lot of that money's tied up in simply being available. It's a physical position. I feel like if you kind of lessen the burden there, it's not a massive give, but I think it speaks to the issue at hand, and you're good.
Yeah.
So
I think that's fair. I was pretty surprised in general. I had first caught wind of this maybe around April or early May that Godchaux might be one of those guys looking for a new contract. I was pretty surprised that he felt like he had a ton of leverage here.
I know you can't reward everybody.
Yeah.
But this is a guy that has played well for his role. I know people think he doesn't play well, but he's played well for his role.
Yeah.
And we've kind of heard that he is a locker room guy.
He is.
That he is a guy that's an important part of this team, and we've talked a lot about building a culture. I think that's what the caller talked about, right? Building this culture. He might be a culture guy. The one that I don't get, and we don't know for sure that he wants a new contract, but this was in Mike Reese's Sunday notes.
Josh Uche.
Joshua Uche. Thank you.
Yeah.
Joshua Uche. I apologize, Joshua. That's going to take me all year, but I am a big, like, if you want me to call you that, I'll call you that. That's your name. That's your, but Joshua Uche just signed a contract. What has changed between now and then?
The one thing that I agree with you, he has no leg to stand on. He signed the deal. He could have taken the deals that were out there
and that's where I'm at.
More money at it.
You just signed it now.
That one makes no sense.
If you get to November and he's playing really well in this new, more aggressive defensive system, and you want to talk about a long-term deal, then that would make some sense to me. Dude, you just signed.
Right.
That's the contract. If they give a new contract to a player who hasn't played a snap of real football since signing his last one, that to me is a step too far. That's where I'd start to worry about it.
I agree completely.
I also don't know, can they sign him to a new contract?
They can't sign him to a new contract, but could they give him more money on this one? Like, yeah, I mean, you can you can add like an incentive package or something like that didn't pre-exist or whatever. I mean, you can do all sorts of things, but
that would bother me.
Well, the problem is though, it would bother me too, and it's borderline ridiculous. You signed a free agent contract that you knew what the number was, you knew it was low.
Right.
Now, that being said, they give Rhamondre this extension. They give Barmore this extension. They give a little extra here to Godshaw. They give a little extra here to Judon. This is the precedent that starts to get set. At some point, guys, even if it's ridiculous, when you start to set this precedent of we can be had at the negotiating table, then the Joshua Uches of the world are going to start to say, well, I took a little less to come back
But this is my point. You said, where do you draw the line? That's where I draw the line.
Guys that just signed their contracts.
I mean, maybe a little before there, but certainly before, maybe to another extent as well, but certainly before there.
So
you got to give me at least a couple games to show me why you're worth more than what I just paid you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's nothing against Joshua Uche. It's just to your point. Now you're setting a really wild precedent, because what happens when you sign a guy in free agency and he comes out and he has a really good camp? Right? So you have to draw that line somewhere.
You have to draw that line somewhere, and all these guys that are going to be up next year, and there are a handful of them, are all going to come knocking if you start to give out these deals. Summer is here, which means it's time to turn off that alarm and sleep in thanks to Bob's Discount Furniture. Save big by bundling Bob's Bob-O-Pedic mattresses with your choices of fantastic adjustable bases full of features like charging ports, under-bed lighting, and Bluetooth speakers. So stop in and sleep better with Bob's Discount Furniture, the official furniture store of the New England Patriots. The caller mentioned Matthew Judon. I just want to touch on this real quick, and then we can get into our winners and losers. The Matthew Judon situation also fascinates me a little bit, because in reality, the right thing to do is probably to shop Matthew Judon in a trade.
Well, the right thing to do is to do that before the draft. At this point, his value is so diminished.
Well,
that's maybe a little strong.
No,
but
you just don't really have. I mean, that ship has sailed. But I don't think it's diminished, because
it is.
It isn't though, because you're still going to get a full year of service.
Evan, we just did this. We just did this 3 years ago with Stephon Gilmore. It's the exact same thing. When teams have more cap space, open roster spots, they're still building their roster. They're more willing to make trades, especially for a big money player. I don't know that right now, what they get for Gilmore, 6th?
Yeah.
I don't know that right now he's a 6th, but every day you wait, his value goes down.
I think the Stephon Gilmore situation was different.
It's incredibly similar.
But I just think it's different because of a couple of reasons. One, the biggest one, Bill doesn't trade like other people trade.
Okay. I'll give you that.
So Bill's out here making trades. We know that he trades differently than other people do. His value chart, or whatever you want to call it, or what is important to him in a trade, he is not going to be what I would think Elliott Wolf would do, which is, I'm going to call all 31 teams and tell them that Matthew Judon is on the block. He can be had. call me, and now all of a sudden you have a line of 6 teams out the door all interested in Matthew Judon. Every single contender that could make it work financially with Matthew Judon should be interested in a Pro Bowl pass rusher like Matthew Judon. So he should have a market. I also don't think it's necessarily the same because of the nature of the position. It's just
they're both elite positions.
But corner, those guys tend to sputter out a little bit faster than pass rushers do because it's a skill position and it's a position predicated on speed. Pass rushers, especially edge guys. I mean, look at like Daniel Hunter. Daniel Hunter's been in the league for like 15 years and he's still getting after the quarterback.
Okay, so
he just got another big contract. Daniel Hunter's got to be like 33, 34 years old.
Well, let's I think he is. Well, let's do this then. What would you set the price at for Judon? We actually had this conversation months ago. I'm curious if you remember, but
I would want a top 100 pick for him. I would probably settle for what we would project to be.
Wrong.
Wrong about what?
Wrong. I wouldn't settle for less than a top 100 pick.
So
I'm going to give you some numbers here.
So real quick, here's the other side of it with Matthew Judon, which is it goes back to the culture thing.
Yeah.
He's probably not only the best player on the team, I would say he's probably the most popular player on the team too. So you go ahead and you trade a guy like Matthew Judon. Now you have to worry about the message that's sending to the locker. Trading a guy like Matthew Judon on this roster is going to look to the other 52 guys like you waved the white flag.
Especially
like you don't actually care about
especially
winning.
After paying everybody you did. This is the guy that doesn't get rewarded. It goes back to that present thing. And I'm with you. At this point, I would keep him. Yeah. But if we're going to discuss trading him, Evan, player A, 32 years old.
Yes.
In his previous 3 seasons, 38 games, 32 sacks, 62 quarterback hits, 33 tackles for loss.
Okay.
Player B, 31 years old. His previous 3 seasons, 39 games, so one more game, 9 fewer sacks, 28 fewer quarterback hits, 7 fewer tackles for loss.
Yeah.
Both players are coming off of a season-ending injury. Player A, the guy with the better numbers, needs a new contract. Player B is signed for the next 3 years with cap hits of $6.5 million, $28.5 million, and $23.5 million.
Okay.
Who's worth more?
The guy with the more sacks.
Player A.
Yeah.
Okay. So player A, again, same age.
Yeah.
Both same position. Both coming off of season-ending injuries. Player A is Matthew Judon currently. Player B is Khalil Mack right before he was traded to the Chicago Bears. Do you remember what the return was for that? That was a second.
Yep.
A fifth. And a... Wait. This is written really annoyingly. I got to find it. But it's a lot.
It was a lot. But Khalil Mack was considered, I believe, to be a better player just off of reputation. He was a first-team All-Pro Defensive Player of the Year candidate early on in his career. I'm not necessarily saying that it...
Judon was in the running for that a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, but Judon was never... Judon's never been the first-team All-Pro. He's a 4-time Pro Bowler, but he's never made an All-Pro team, first team. I definitely hear you that there's probably statistical comps there. I just personally think that the reputation around the league at the time of the Khalil Mack trade was that Khalil Mack was a little bit of a better player.
Or, sorry, I had that wrong. It was when he was traded from the Raiders to the Chargers. So it was Mack in a 6th-round pick for a second.
Yeah.
If I'm Elliott Wolf, I am... And I know he's not considered, but we're not going by considered. We're going by what the players are.
That's what matters.
Okay, but no, if I'm Elliott Wolf, I am reading GMs those exact numbers. I am saying this is a guy who is in a better situation right now.
And they're all gonna tell you he's a good player.
And by the way,
Elliott,
Khalil Mack had foot surgery. Judon had, was it elbow or shoulder? Bicep surgery. So that's not as much of an impingement. If I'm Elliott Wolf, I am not accepting less than a top 100 pick for Matthew Judon.
If they can get a 2nd-round pick for Matthew Judon, they should make that trade.
And I'll throw the 6th in, because if we're going to mirror it, let's mirror it. I'm fine with that. I'll throw the 6th in.
Yeah,
I would even throw a 5th in. I
don't care about the 6th-round pick. If they can get a 2nd-round pick for Matthew Judon, they should do that.
And look, it's probably going to be from a contender, so we're probably talking about a pick in the 60s.
That's still a very valuable pick.
Very valuable. I'm just saying, this is the value of this player. This is the value of Matthew Judon. Not me pulling things out of thin air. Tangibly. And I went back and looked.
I'd be surprised if they could get that much.
I went back and looked at edge players in their 30s being traded. Not only is it just edge player in their 30 coming off an injury, the same. Contract situation, Max was actually more favorable. Judon's is more favorable. There is, maybe it goes down with third. Maybe it goes down with third because Judon needs a new deal. But I am not accepting less than a top 100 pick for Matthew Judon because this is what this player is worth on the open market.
Well, that's what the comp is.
This is what this production is worth on the open market. Let me phrase it that way.
Right, because the market.
But we know, Evan, there are dumbass teams that pay solely for production.
You don't have to convince me. I'm just saying, in general, if they can get a second-round pick for Matthew Judon, then I would make that trade. I would, because you say, okay, yeah, it's going to be from a contender. It's probably going to be the 60th pick of the second round or something like that, the 58th pick. Okay, sure, but what if it's a trade? I'm trying to think of a good example. What if it's a trade with an NFC contender?
Yeah.
Philly, I don't know, whatever. And then their quarterback gets hurt, right? And then they end up having a bad season, down year just because of situation.
Yeah.
Whatever. You never know, is my point with those types of picks. On top of it, it's just a valuable pick just to have it, whether it falls.
And so, wait, sorry. This is the difference. I want to finish that take. Khalil Mack was traded in March.
Yeah.
Which obviously you can't do now with Judon. But, and this is part of the if I can't get that value, I'm holding on to him. I'm probably holding on to him anyway. But, my
guess is that this was probably talked about before the draft. And I really feel like this regime, it's twofold. One, there's tangible evidence, to go back to your tangible evidence, there's tangible evidence that their pass rush significantly dropped off post-Judon last year.
Yes.
Significantly, especially their standard four-man rush. They could still get pressure with blitzing, but they had to blitz to get pressure.
Right.
They had to draw it up, and they had to be exotic to get home because they didn't have anybody winning one-on-one outside of Barmore, who's on the interior, and it's a different thing. So they had to scheme up pressure post-Judon. They were 30th in the NFL post-Judon in four-man pass rush pressure. 30th. So there was a tangible evidence that rushing four, get home with four, the old adage, right? If you could get home with four, you're going to be in good shape. They couldn't do it. So on the field, if you're Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo, and this is, I think, a big deal in general with some of these re-signings, because I wrote this in the mailbag today, and we hear a lot about this. Oh, funny, they're just re-signing all of Bill's guys, and I thought Bill couldn't draft, and I thought he couldn't evaluate offense, and now they're paying Rhamondre Stevenson. I feel like some element of this from Gerard Mayo and Elliott Wolf's standpoint is that even though you probably in your heart of hearts know you're not going to be a true contender this year, you can't stink.
No, you want to be competitive.
You can't stink. So that doesn't jive with trading Matthew Judon. If you trade Matthew Judon, you get worse. There's no no in between.
To go back to that whole Khalil Mack rant, I say that, and you actually set me up for the take, and I blew it, so that's my bad. Because you said, I'm saying, this is what Matthew Judon is worth. Matthew Judon is worth a second-round pick. History shows us that. And you said they're not going to get a second-round pick for him. Correct.
Yeah.
Don't trade him. And that's where it comes back to the Stephon Gilmore thing. They just traded Gilmore to get him off the roster because they didn't want to deal with the contract situation.
Yeah.
Bad idea.
I don't think this regime will do that.
No.
This regime is looking to make football trades. Like, if you give us something in return that's worth it,
right, then
we'll do it. But I don't think that they're looking to just get rid of guys.
What's worth it is a second-round pick.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So,
I would probably say a third. I could be persuaded. Like, if it's at the trade deadline and you're already 2-6 or something like that.
That's a completely different story. And you don't have a new contract done or you don't add years. Like, that's fine. I'll give you that. But I don't think you trade him right now. I don't. No. Unless somebody wants to get really stupid off of you first.
It's big. It's big that, in my mind, it's big that this regime gets off to a decent start. And it might not be wins and losses necessarily just because of how hard the schedule is out of the gate, especially. But if it can translate into at least, oh wow, this is, I referenced them earlier. It's kind of like the Red Sox, where it's like, are they a World Series contender? No.
That's a little different.
No, it isn't.
No,
because
it is.
Are they a World Series contender? No. But are they fun to watch objectively? Yeah, they are fun to watch.
Yeah, that kind of happened that's different. That happened by accident.
I don't think it happened by accident.
Yeah, it did.
But regardless.
You know what's fun to watch? Mookie Betts.
No, obviously. But the point being is that if the Patriots are, if once a week you can turn on a Patriots game and it's competitive, they're fun, they have some young guys that are flashing, all that sort of stuff going on, then yes, it's going to stink at the end of the season when they're 5-12 again,
right.
4-13.
No. They want to be competitive, but this is the difference. Like
if you trade Matthew Judon, my point is, if you trade Matthew Judon, you are very much risking the competitive side of it.
They're in year one of a rebuild. Like, competitive is good. That's the difference between them and the Red Sox. The Red Sox have been a last place
I was just
team.
saying how I feel when I watch the
fair.
Red Sox.
No, you want a watchable product, and definitely Matthew Judon makes them a more watchable product.
And
Absolutely.
he's the biggest star on the team.
Yeah.
All right, winners and losers from minicamp. I know this is a little bit late to the punch here, but I still think it's important or something that we can do here. So do you want to start with winners or losers? Do you want to go positive or negative?
We can do winners. Where are mine?
All right. Should we go? I'm gonna go 5-1. I like going in reverse because I want to tease the.
Oh, I didn't do them in order.
Oh, see, you gotta do them in order. We gotta get that. I always do things in order. I'm a big order guy. Like I want rankings. I want lists.
Okay.
Right. Number 5.
It's still a list. You don't have to.
No, I want it ranked.
All right, but it can be a list without it being ranked. Do you rank your shopping list?
Sometimes.
Wait, stop.
I tier it. That's for sure.
Hang on. What the hell does that mean?
It means that sometimes, we're on a budget. You don't want to go over budget. There are certain items on the list that are luxury items that I don't necessarily need.
Then you don't put them on the list.
That's not true. If
I have my list.
If it's a good deal and I have enough, if I get some deals and I have enough money at the end of the list and I say, hey, I kind of want that. Go ahead.
Oh, see, I don't keep any snacks in my house because if I have snacks, I will eat the snacks, and that's bad. So I only buy what I need to make lunch and dinner. I'm not even a big breakfast person. So I guess that's it. I have my list. Sometimes I'll put something on the list that'd be cool to have, but sometimes I'm like, I don't need to have this right now, so I take it off the list. I don't do game time decisions at the supermarket. That's
why I don't go to the supermarket.
That's the worst thing you can do.
I can't go in the supermarket because then I'm just grabbing the snacks.
Oh, okay.
I'm just grabbing the snacks. So, anyways, that I digress. All right, number 5 because I'm an order person. I care about order matters. I have Jalen Polk.
Okay.
I just felt like Jalen Polk wasn't necessarily that I was like, wow, this guy's gonna be Jamar Chase. You know what I mean? But I really thought that the positive with him in the spring was just the upward trajectory of his play. Felt like every single practice he got a little bit better, a little bit more noticeable. Then he caps it off on the last Wednesday of minicamp with a really, really strong ending of practice especially, but just in general, a solid practice all around. I liked what you like to see with young players like a Polk. Yeah, obviously you hope that you get out there that very first practice and he's just out like gangbusters and he's just awesome, right? Yeah, everybody hopes that. But in reality, the more realistic option is that he just gets better and better and better and you just see sort of a little bit of improvement every single week. That's how I felt like with Jalen Polk. Thought every single practice that we saw from rookie minicamp to the end, it got a little bit better than the last, and that tells me that we're on the right track here with him. So
all right. I put mine in order. I'm going to go Jalen Reagor.
Yeah.
Just a lot of this is going to be a common theme with mine. You'll notice this, but again, it's not like real football they're doing, so it's just how involved are guys? Does it look like the coaching staff has a plan for a guy? Does it look like they plan on him being here, being on the roster? Is he somebody that's more on the periphery? And Jalen Reagor, super involved on offense and special teams. He looked like a guy that they're at least going to have compete for a roster spot. And this ties in with some other guys we'll get to when we get to the downs list, but he seems to be in good position right now. And I think that's encouraging for him. He, performed relatively well too. So Jalen Reagor.
That's a fair one. All right, number 4, similar to what you just said in terms of usage and things like that, Jalen Hawkins.
Okay, I had him too.
I was not necessarily, I will admit, that when they made the Jalen Hawkins signing, I thought, this is another camp body, another guy that, if he could come out of the woodwork, but more realistically, probably not on the team. Now I feel like there's definitely a role for him on this team. He's probably going to make it, unless he just totally bombs in the summer, as that extra safety, free safety, Deron Harmon type. He's not Devin McCourty. He's not Ed Reed, right? He's going to be Deron Harmon. He's going to be a serviceable free safety that when it's 3rd and 10, they can put him on the field, move Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers around. We've talked about this a little bit already. I really was surprised at how involved Jalen Hawkins was early on in camp in the summer. I keep saying summer, in the spring. It definitely seemed to me like he was part of that core group, or getting into that core group of Peppers, Duggar, Jalen Hawkins is the third guy. Remember, unless Marty Mapu comes out of nowhere as a free safety type, they really don't have a third guy. And, Adrian Phillips was kind of the third guy. Devin was obviously the third guy before he retired. They don't necessarily have a Sharpied-in third guy right now. They don't have a lock of this is going to be a rotational player at safety. I feel like Jalen Hawkins is probably the one that made the most headway in that department.
Yeah, so I had him too. I put him third since we're ordering it, and a lot of the same things as you. So I guess my fourth, I'd say Caden Wallace. And the reason I have him on there, it looks like they might keep him at right tackle after all, which is very good for him.
Yeah.
Because they're going to let him play a position he knows how to play. And that's a pretty good way to start your NFL career. So if I'm him, I'm pretty happy about that. That I'm going to be somewhere I'm comfortable. I'm going to be somewhere I know what I'm doing. And I'm going to have a chance to truly compete for a starting job.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I didn't put any linemen on this just because without pads, you're not really evaluating linemen. But in terms of usage and where they're at, that's a more than fair point. All right, next one, Alex Austin.
I had him as well.
I almost put Alex Austin at number one. I was pretty close. Probably one of the biggest winners, I would say, of the entire spring by far. Alex Austin went from a cut, right? He was cut last year, or waived last year, I want to say, by Buffalo.
Yeah.
Twice,
and by Houston.
Yeah, picked up by the Patriots, starts a few games towards the end of the year on a bad Patriots team that was, needed another corner, was banged up, no Christian Gonzalez, J.C. Jackson and Jack Jones go off the reservation. They just needed bodies at that point. Plays well last year, comes into the spring, continues to play well in the spring, to the point where I put him on my list of roster locks the other day when I was kind of looking back on the 53 and just had a few minutes to just sort of decompress from the spring. I put him on the locks. I feel like him, obviously Gonzo and the Joneses, those four guys at corner, I don't really see a whole lot of – I don't see a path where those four guys aren't on this team. And I now put Austin in that category because he played well last year. Gerard Mayo said in the spring, he's an NFL player.
Yeah.
Now we need to determine what's his ceiling as an NFL player. I don't want to put a ceiling on him yet. I'm not going to – he's not Ty Law. I'm not like saying he's going to be Darrelle Revis, all right, Stephon Gilmore. But I'm not putting
they got two all-pro corners.
Yeah, I'm not putting him on that. But – I do feel like it's not fair to necessarily put a ceiling on him yet, because what could he be? He could be a much better player than what initially thought.
And look, they've done this before. They've found corners out of nowhere: Jonathan Jones, Malcolm Butler, J.C. Jackson, and they've turned them into really, really good players. And I know a lot of people point to Bill for that, and Bill obviously gets some of the credit, but like Mike Pellegrino.
I was going to say, shout out Mike Pellegrino.
Heck of a coach.
I was just about to say that.
One heck of a coach, Mike Pellegrino. So, does he work his magic again here with Alex Austin? We'll see when the pads come on. Is the caveat with all of this? But I don't know how you can't look at that and just be
You feel better about Austin putting him up there because he played in games last year and he played well.
Corner, there are like non-contact elements that come with it
receiver,
that you see. Yeah, so
Mike Pellegrino, shout out. I feel like Mike Pellegrino. And I'm not just saying this because I like the guy. Mike Pellegrino should have more buzz in the coaching community. I think he did make Tom Pelissero's list last year.
He did.
He's somebody that definitely looks like maybe I could actually even see it here in New England, since DeMarcus Covington is a defensive line guy and a front seven guy. If Mike Pellegrino became their and this does happen more often now, like their passing game coordinator,
Yeah.
but on the defensive side of the ball, or maybe it's secondary coach and it's the whole secondary
Right.
that he's in charge of. I could see a promotion here coming for him as well, and I do think that there's DC in his future. I think he could be a defensive
and I would say too, because you always want to look ahead. Like Covington's gotten head coaching.
Yeah.
Didn't he interview for a head coaching job once?
No, he interviewed
that a
for
coordinator?
defensive coordinator with Arizona.
But he's a guy that's. I mean, if the defense is solid, which we
Yeah.
think it will be, like he's going to be a guy that gets head coaching looks. And I would say on that side of the ball right now, is there a more obvious next man up for DC than Mike? I think he's been here longer than any of those other coaches.
I mean, it's him and Brian.
I think he's been here longer than Brian.
Well,
Well,
not literally.
Not literally, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
He's been on staff
He's
because
been
Brian
coaching.
started in the scouting department.
Yeah, I mean, Brian started with a clipboard at age 8
That's true.
on the sideline. So that guy's obviously a lifer.
I don't want to diminish what Brian's done. I just in my mind
No.
I go to the
No,
the
that's
10
probably
years.
fair. That's probably fair.
But he'd be in that conversation. All right, so yeah, so I add Jalen Hawkins, Alex Austin, 3 and 2. So you haven't given your number 2 yet, right?
No, number 2, I'm giving it to Rhamondre Stevenson.
All right.
You signed a 4-year contract extension. You won the spring.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good spring for you. You got $17
So
million.
why not Barmore?
$17 million. It was a little bit before the spring.
Wait, no, somebody signed one during the spring.
David Andrews signed like a 1-year contract extension. Rhamondre Stevenson got the mini bag. I hear you. It's not the bag, but for a running back, that's a pretty good sized bag. That's a nice money grab. So Rhamondre Stevenson, I thought. We'll see what it looks like in terms of the outside zone and all the scheme stuff that we'd like to get into in here. I think that might be something I didn't mention earlier that I am also still a little bit wary of. I still don't love it. I still don't love him running outside zone at a high rate, like that being his number one blocking scheme in the year is outside zone. Maybe he's going to prove me wrong. He did look a little bit more svelte, I felt like, in the summer or in the spring. I keep doing that. In the spring, he looked a little bit more svelte, a little bit he looked like he was in great shape, which this is going all the way back. But don't you remember his rookie year when he came in out of shape and Ivan Fears put him on PUP and told him to go run the hill? So he's come a long way from those days where he couldn't even get on the field as a rookie at first in the spring and in the summer because he was out of shape. Now he looks like he's in great shape, gets the contract. This offense, for better or worse, and I know there are going to be certain people, and you're going to say me, there's going to be certain people that aren't going to love the philosophy, the big picture of it. For better or worse, Rhamondre Stevenson is going to be the featured piece of this offense. The offense is going to be, he's going to be to the Patriots as Nick Chubb is to the Browns. That's going to be the offense, and that's going to be the base of the system. That's why they gave him this contract. That's why they've made it a lot about Rhamondre. This spring. So, Rhamondre Stevenson, number 2.
All right, number 1.
Do you have Rhamondre? That was Rhamondre yours too?
No, I've had Rager, Wallace, Hawkins, Austin.
All right, number 1, Drake May.
Yeah.
But also Patriots fans, because the good news is Patriots fans, no one's crowning him yet. We're not putting him on any duck boats just yet. We did that Friday for another team. We're not doing that yet for Drake May. Yet. But the good news is that what you wanted to see was, can this dude play? Does he look like he belongs? Is he getting better? The same thing that we were saying about Jalen Polk. In this situation, I feel like he checked the boxes he needed to check in the spring. The eye test, the improvement, all those sorts of things. And he wins, but so do you, the people. They also win because that's your quarterback. That's your guy. You drafted him number 3 overall. If we came onto the show, and I know people sometimes say, you overrate the spring, don't get too hyped up. Fine. If that's how you want to look at it, you want to have fun, you don't want to be excited about something in your life, fine. But if we had come on the show and we had him on losers and we said he threw 10 picks in the spring and it was a disaster, then we'd all be freaking out.
Right.
So the fact that it's mostly positive is mostly positive. So I had him number 1.
So I had him number 1 for what he did. I was very also, so I had him in the winners, number 1, because the footwork looks much better.
Yeah.
He seems like he's kind of starting to gel with the teammates. That's all good. He obviously looked impressive. I was also just put him in the losers because of what happened around him.
Yeah.
And, that's not great for him. But, no, he did everything he needed to this spring. And to your point, that's only so much. It is the spring. But I thought he did everything he needed to this spring.
Okay. Now to the downs.
Yeah.
To the losers.
I mean, I think 3 of these are really obvious.
Okay. We'll see what
3 or 4.
We'll see if we're on the same page
okay.
here. Number 5.
Yeah.
After we almost did it again, and by we,
You have him
mean,
at 5?
I mean me.
You have him at 5?
As we almost did it again. I almost fell for it, but I said I wasn't going to. Now, maybe it comes out eventually. Maybe it's a little nugget in Mike Reese's Sunday notes, like bullet point 6, kind of buried in there as he does sometimes. The fact that Tyquan Thornton missed that Wednesday practice irks the crap out of me. Because you did it to me again, Tyquan. You had a couple of good practices early in the spring, and I don't know for a fact. Maybe it was an excused absence. Maybe it was something personal going on. So I don't want to go out there and get too crazy because I don't know for a fact.
Right.
But all that we can assume is that all we can say is that he was not available for a practice, and history tells us that it's injury related, which means that he had another setback with some sort of physical ailment, which means that we're right back to where we started with Tyquan Thornton.
And I'll add to it, even just on the field. I talked about Jalen Reagor before, how I feel he's in a great spot to make the roster because of all the things he was doing. When they broke for special teams, so we how many times have we done this math where it's where it's Pop, Bourne, 2 rookies are roster locks. That's 4. We think KJ Osborne's probably going to make the team. That's 5. If you're going to be that 6th receiver, you'd better be doing something else.
Yeah.
You'd better be playing in the kicking game. And Reagor obviously does a ton of that both ways. We saw him getting some work at gunner.
Right.
When they broke for special teams, there were 2 wide receivers. Only 2 wide receivers that didn't take part. Tyquan and another guy that I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah.
But
we will.
Tyquan did special teams one day. He didn't do it the other day. He was off with the other guy. I don't see. They tried him as a gunner. I just don't see how that works because he's going to need a tackle.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
That's if he can't play special teams, how are you keeping him as a 6th receiver? If his carrying trait is speed, and Jalen Reagor's carrying trait is also speed, and Jalen Reagor can play special teams, why Tyquan Thornton, no guaranteed money on the contract, why is he staying? I had him at 2.
There's not, and I probably should have had him higher, but
Yeah.
I put him that low because, in fairness to him,
He did have those 1 or 2 practices.
he did start off well.
I'm looking at
this is basically based off of the fact that he missed that Wednesday practice.
I would have had him on there if not, because, again, I'm doing this a lot on, usage and how are guys setting themselves up to make the roster,
Sure.
not necessarily total performance. That's part of it, but I do not feel – I feel it is – I would call it – I don't want to say more or less likely because we don't know what the coach's ultimate plan is, but, I feel – not that I ever felt confident about it. I feel less confident saying Tyquan will make the roster now than I felt about it going into the spring.
Me too, 100%. Because
and that's why he ends up on the downs.
You laid it out nicely with Reagor in the conversation. Yeah. But just also to add to that, Jalen Reagor, I think Tyquan's a little bit faster and a little bit better of a deep threat than Jalen Reagor.
I think he's a little bit faster. I don't think he's exponentially faster.
To me, I would give that if we were ranking, their skill sets or whatever, I would say that Tyquan Thornton is a little bit more impactful as a deep threat.
Okay.
Just a tiny little bit.
Yeah.
That does not. Jalen Reagor is in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
So if that's what Tyquan has on him, and Tyquan is at a level 7,
right,
and Reagor is at a level 5, and then Reagor does all these other things on special teams and things like that, and is more durable
and blocks,
then where Tyquan doesn't have a leg to stand on.
Exactly. And that's that's where it's with the receivers, it's all relative. With a lot of it, it's all relative. So I look at it, maybe I'm not as concerned about Tyquan if Reagor wasn't as involved.
Yeah.
It's not just Tyquan himself. I just don't feel like he's in great position.
Yep. All right. Number 4, which
I have number 5.
Oh yeah, what's yours?
Kevin Harris. Goes back to the usage thing. We've talked about that third running back. It felt like this may be a good chance. Let's see if they give Kevin Harris a lot of run and kind of clear the runway for him. They didn't. It was pretty split. Honestly, I think he probably did less than JaMychal Hasty. So he's a guy at 220 that he's going to make his impact on the pads. Come on, I'm not entirely.
That's why I didn't have him on, because I hear what you're saying.
So this is more where, again, I'm not doing it solely on performance. Performance, it's kind of tough to tell, but I think that like I said about Thornton, like I don't know that the coaches weren't exactly using Kevin Harris. They weren't giving him the opportunities like you'd give a guy that you're expecting to completely compete for a roster spot. Doesn't mean he can't, but I thought maybe we'd come in and they would make it clear that he was the favorite for the third running back. If they were going to do that with anybody, it was going to be him. And I don't think they established a clear favorite. And to me, that if I'm Kevin Harris, that sucks.
Yeah, I just feel like with him, they did do some early down work in the spring.
Yeah.
But it's a passing camp. And so I'm at least going to give them – they've clearly made – and as they should, because it's just not his skill set. It's not his role. They've clearly made it apparent that he is not going to be factoring into the passing game at all.
Which, again, is not – in a setting like that is where you would give that guy a chance to maybe show what he can do in that regard.
Right, but they clearly look at Gibson, Rhamondre, JaMychal Hasty.
Right.
Those are our guys that are going to contribute potentially in the passing game. When we get into training camp, we get into the preseason games when they're truly doing live 11-on-11s.
Oh, Kevin Harris might lead the NFL in preseason rushing.
Yeah, if he's not getting any 1st and 10 carries at that point, then that's when I would be like, all right, this is.
But I'm just saying, I thought they may give him a chance to just see what he could do in a little bit expanded role, and they didn't. So
me too. I had Shaun Wade on here.
Okay.
Really? Yeah, I had Shaun Wade on here. Not anything because he did anything particularly poor. I just feel like with Alex Austin's emergence, with Zay Bolden getting more snaps in the slot.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Marcus Jones is back. It just feels, Gonzo's obviously back too. It just feels like it's turning into a little bit of a numbers game with Shaun Wade. And he wasn't, it feels to me like the last couple of drafts, maybe since 2022, this regime, Elliott Wolf, feels a little bit more ownership of those picks. And like those are kind of his guys. So like the Shaun Wade trade predates that type of stuff. And I just feel like maybe he's going to end up being a guy that made the team last year. That's not going to make the team this year because they might prioritize Austin, Bolden, Marcellus Dial, like the guys that they have invested in over the last year or two.
So I had Wade on. I was one of my last guys on. I had him on because I feel like they need that depth in the slot. I don't know how much Bolden's going to play in the slot when it actually matters.
They're clearly trying to get him to
but
play
they're trying to get him there. Also, we didn't see a ton of Marcellus Dial this spring because he was hurt. So, somebody's going to get left off. Somebody's going to get left off, and Wade's certainly in that conversation.
All right, who's got?
Chad Ryland.
Oh, yeah, he's on my list, but higher.
Okay, so you'll kind of see how I did mine, but not the only reason he's not higher is Joey Slye didn't have a great spring either.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we've talked a lot about this, so we don't need to get a ton into it. But, again, is the Week 1 kicker currently on the Patriots roster? I think there's a decent chance the answer to that question is no.
It feels as though Chad Ryland has developed the yips, and it's 100% mental. I got to admit, I thought when he made that game winner in Denver, that maybe it would flip for him.
Nope.
Because that's got it for any player to make a play like that, a game-winning kick, a game-winning touchdown, whatever. You have your first breakout game, as a receiver or something like that. Usually the pendulum can swing. Right. That ends up just being that's the Quinn Nordine in stadium practice of regular season games, right? Like that ends up being the anomaly out of the entire larger sample, which is that Chad Ryland might not be an NFL kicker, and they might not have an NFL kicker on the roster right now. Like you said, we've talked about this a ton, but it blows my mind that they're in a position where they have two kickers on the roster, but they kind of have no kickers on the roster, which is scary.
Right.
So Chad Ryland to me was number 2, so not too far off. My next one was Bailey Zappi.
I didn't even think to put him. He was so out of the picture.
Not that I expected him to have this amazing spring or anything like that. I admit I almost feel a little bit bad for Bailey Zappi. I don't tend to feel bad because they're all making millions and they'll all be fine in the grand scheme of things. But I do feel a little bit bad for Bailey Zappi because it just has to feel like such an elephant in the room. He hasn't been moved yet. At least Mac Jones was able to close the book.
Right.
Like, he was able to close the chapter of his career. It didn't end well. It was ugly. It didn't work. But now he's down in Jacksonville, and he's the backup quarterback. He's what's the guy from Blue Mountain State?
Alex Moran. He's not quite Alex Moran. But
He's having the time of his life down there.
he is, but I don't think he's quite Alex Moran.
No, he's not. But he's having the time of his life down there. If you were Bailey Zappi, aren't you just at this point? And I don't know for a fact that he feels this way, but you have to think that he's begging to be traded.
I
Begging.
think he still thinks he's going to be the starter.
I'm sure he does, but at the same time, not only does he have to get through the quote-unquote veteran starter,
Yeah.
he also has to get through the number 3 overall pick.
Yeah, no,
And that's not
if I'm
happening.
him, I want to get moved before camp because I don't want to come in late having to learn them. Basically, if I'm him, I don't want to become Matt Corral, Will Greer, Nathan Rourke,
Yeah.
where I'm just there playing catch-up. And that's nothing against those guys. And, who knows what was really going on behind the scenes last year with the quarterback position, but part of it was they just weren't caught up.
Yeah.
They weren't. There's a massive advantage to being there in camp. So I didn't even think to put Bailey Zappi because he was just so after that first day. Remember when we were freaking out about him getting the second reps?
Yep.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, he'd reduced reps as the spring went
Yeah.
along. Drake May clearly jumped him on the depth chart. He had a few throws that I could say were, oh, yeah, that was a nice throw, notable type throws. But for the most part, it was more of the same of what we've seen.
He had the same spring he's had. It's
Yeah.
just the circumstances are incredibly different.
Yeah, I feel for him a little bit. I do. I just feel like there's no purpose for him here.
Yeah.
And them stringing him along like this is really doing nobody any good. It has to create some sort of awkwardness a little bit
Sure.
in that quarterback room. So I look to still see them. I think they move him quickly if they can this summer. Could it turn into a Jacoby Brissett 2016 redux where he has a great – it was 2016, right, or 2017? I don't remember. It's years ago now. He has that great preseason game, the last preseason game.
Right.
Lights the world on fire. They end up trading him for Philip Dorsett. I don't know.
That would have been 17, right? Yeah.
Yeah, probably. I don't know if that's necessarily in the cards with Bailey Zappi, but I wonder if there's a player-for-player trade. Hey, we're not – this guy's – being phased out of our program, he's being phased out of your program. Let's make something happen here. I'd almost rather them do that than take back a conditional 7th or 6th round pick. Take back somebody that is going to have to clear waivers and might actually contribute to the team instead.
All right. My third
Yes.
was just and this is again another usage one. Just as a whole, the offensive line.
Yeah.
A lot of moving pieces. We already saw them move Caden Wallace off left tackle, which I think is good for him, but he's moving. Michael Onwenu's moving back inside. It seems like already there's maybe some worry about if the initial plan is going to work up there. A non-padded, so huge caveat, but they didn't look great. The guard position's also kind of turning into a carousel. I didn't come out of the spring. I know, shocker. I didn't come out of the spring feeling great about where the offensive line is at.
I almost had them on here. I did the caveat of I'm not going to put trenches on here yet, but Brandon Thorne, friend of the program, offensive line guy, big offensive line guru, established the run is where you can find this article. Every single year, Brandon puts out offensive line rankings 1 through 32. He ranks the units, the 5-man units. The Patriots, and this is just his initial ranking, and he said it's subject to change based off of training camp, preseason, buzz, that sort of stuff. But right now, he has 2 teams in tier 6, which is the lowest tier, and he calls it bottom feeders. Number 31, your New England Patriots, the second worst offensive line in the NFL.
Them?
Number 32, the Washington Commanders.
Oh, yeah, their line's not good.
Ironically, both these teams have rookie quarterbacks that they want to play right away. So Brandon has the Patriots as the 31st ranked offensive line on paper in the NFL. As of right now, he has it as Jukes Okorafor is the left to right. Jukes Okorafor, Sidy So, David Andrews, Layden Robinson, Mike Onwenu. He has Layden Robinson at right guard. Obviously, that is
up in the air.
Who knows? But basically, the combination might move around a little bit. But as he points out, they're going to start a rookie somewhere.
Yep.
It's either going to probably be Layden Robinson at right guard or Caden Wallace at right tackle. And the bigger thing that he points out is if it is a Chooks on Wenu group at tackle, he is petrified of the pass protection of the edges. And one of the more concerning things about the entire write-up, and I posted a screenshot on my Twitter so you can go ahead and read the entire write-up. One of the bigger concerns about the entire write-up is how low Brandon is on Chooks, Okorafor, playing left tackle. Just read a little bit of it here. This is gold. The team somehow is projected to have former Steelers mediocre at best right tackle Chooks Okorafor as their starting blindside protector, with at least some question marks everywhere else aside from center David Andrews.
He's more out than I am.
I can't disagree with him.
No, he's not wrong.
But the write-up on Chooks Okorafor is terrifying.
Yeah.
That he is basically saying that this guy was a borderline starter on the right side that they are now converting to. We knew all of this, but it's just interesting to hear somebody like Brandon who watches the trenches religiously.
Generally a very level-headed guy. He's not one for hyperbole.
Yeah, or for like hot takes. Like
right.
He's not trying to be on ESPN to spew hot takes.
Right.
He's not Stephen A. Smith, right? Like
right.
This is a guy that watches all 32 offensive lines play religiously and grades them out. And he has the Patriots currently as the second worst offensive line in the entire league. And as he said in the write-up, Drake May is a rookie quarterback.
Yep.
They want to play Drake May. We all want them to play Drake May. He didn't say this, but I'll add this context to it as well. We've argued about it's a factor. It's a factor in all of this. We've argued about it back and forth. I'm not as worried as
people are sick of us arguing about it.
The point being is that I think it's interesting to hear somebody else say the quiet part out loud, which is that on paper, this offensive line is concerning.
Yeah.
All right. Where am I at? I'm at 2. So I had Chad Ryland at 2.
Oh, no. Who was your third?
Bailey Zappi.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I had Taekwondo at 2. We already talked about him.
Yeah, I had Chad Ryland at 2. We already talked about him. We don't have to do that.
So I think we have the same number 1 then.
Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yes, the other guy.
I was hoping that Juju would show some juju in the spring and look a little bit more like the guy that was in Kansas City 2 years ago. He told us at the podium that he's 100% now, the knee's not a problem. I'm beginning to think that it wasn't just the knee. I think he just doesn't have the juice in his legs anymore. It happens. This happens for all receivers at some point. He just does not have any – he doesn't pull away from anybody. The breaking point for me, and I think I've mentioned this before, he was running a shallow drag across the middle of the field. And I don't know if it was zone or man. We don't get the luxury of looking back at the film or anything, so I'm just guessing that it was some sort of zone. But the point being is that Joe Giles Harris, practice squad linebacker, was supposed to latch on to Juju coming across the field. Juju could not run away from Joe Giles Harris. Couldn't do it. Just zero separation. There's no other path to me at this point with Juju other than just eat the money and outright release him. So for 1 year, you're going to have to deal with some dead cap. You have the cap to absorb it. Just do it. It's for the best. It was a bad contract. It was a bad move in free agency. I was tanned up. Could not have been more wrong about this whole situation when it happened. So I'll own that. They have to move on from Juju. It's just not going to work here. And I don't know if he necessarily has anything left.
Yeah, to go back to the special teams thing again, like he's going to have to contribute somewhere else, and it's just not. It's getting tougher and tougher to see the path for him to the roster. Yeah. All things considered, you put it all together, they're going to have to figure something out with him. Because even if you give him a roster spot, is he going to play? Probably not. There's a lot of overlap with him in Jalen Polk, and they've said they want the kids to play, so they got to – maybe they can move him like they moved Jonnu Smith, but they got to figure something out.
Another trade before the draft, right? Like this time of year, you're looking for him to be moved by a team that gets decimated by wide receiver injuries in training camp. 5 guys pull their hamstring in the middle of training camp, and they're down a bunch of bodies. And you're probably looking at teams that have worked with him before, so Pittsburgh, Kansas City. It's possible that in Pittsburgh or Kansas City that could happen.
Right.
I think Kansas City looks pretty okay after drafting Xavier Worthy. They have Xavier Worthy. They have Hollywood Brown now. Like they have their types, and they have we'll see what happens with Rashee Rice, which is maybe the one thing with the Chiefs that could happen is if Rashee Rice gets suspended for a significant amount of time by the league for his off-field stuff. In theory, Juju plays a similar style as Rashee Rice. They're kind of similar guys, those thicker inside receivers. Maybe they could look at that and say, at least we know what we're going to get out of Juju. It's a one-for-one swap in terms of role, and we keep it rolling with the Chiefs. Pittsburgh, Deontay Johnson's not there anymore. They move on from him. Maybe they don't think that they have the depth they once did at receiver. My guess is they probably drafted somebody that they like they always do, but it's possible. It just, in order for us both, I feel like to feel differently about Juju, he had to have a standout spring. He had to be noticeable in the spring, and he was the opposite of noticeable. It was very much disappointing. So with Polk, with Baker, Pop Douglas, there's no playing time for him. Kendrick Bourne will come back. He'll be healthy. It's a long way to go to the roster for Juju. A lot of things are going to have to break his way. You got anything else? That was our...
No, I think that's pretty much it.
All right. Pretty good week in Boston sports. We can talk a little Boston sports here before we wrap it up. But, it's the off season, so we don't necessarily have a full 2 hour of Patriots talk for you. But there was more news than usual with the Patriots. We got Rhamondre Stevenson. We got some training camp dates, so that was cool. But you were at the parade on Friday. We did not meet up for the parade, which is a little disappointing.
I mean, it would have been tough. You couldn't get anywhere.
I knew it. I when you texted me, I was like, I don't think you're going to get any closer. So where were you for the Celtics parade?
So I ended up down by Park Street Government Center. I actually
that's pretty far considering how packed it was that you guys got.
Well, so not only that, I went with a buddy of mine who did it. I mean, excellent James Devlin impression. Just got us right to the front. I mean, we got there maybe 5 minutes before they rolled through. Like, we got off the tee. The parade was already rolling. And, just got behind the fullback. Right. We were probably, in terms of people, like 2-3 rows back, right on. It was the shot was of where we were. You can't see us. There's so many people. But, like, the shot of where we were was in a bunch of the videos and recaps and stuff because – I forget the name of the street I was on, but it's like this narrow street, and as there's big buildings next to it, and as the boats come by, you can see Tatum doesn't expect there to be just this wall of people in what was essentially an alley.
Right.
And he lifted the trophy up, and it was just, and it was a great day. Just hung out in the city for a little bit after. The vibe in the city was awesome. People were great. Awesome day. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah, we were on Causeway, and as you know, the Causeway, there's buildings on both sides, right? The Garden's on the right. If you're looking at it, Tobin's on your right, then the Garden, and on your left is Tavern in the Square, A&B Burger. As you move down, there's no place to go. It's literally a bottleneck. Like, there's no place to go, and it had to have been 10 to 15 people deep. And so the back row of people were just pushed up against, their backs were against the Garden structure. And there was no place to go. And it started a few minutes late. I think they started rolling at maybe 11:10 or something like that. So the natives were getting restless because it was 85 degrees, and then you have probably 50,000 people packed into a couple of city blocks. It was getting a little dicey there for a few minutes. Someone passed out standing next to us, and they needed EMT attention. It was scary. Some woman just collapsed. So that was a little bit scary, but once they started rolling, just an awesome event. And I think you could see from the players' faces, I don't even think they realized how many people there were really going to be. And you could definitely tell. And I was listening to your station on the way in, 98.5. They had Jared Carabas on. And they said something that really made me want to pull over and vomit. Tyler Milliken, known Red Sox hardo, Tyler Milliken, Tyler, has no recollection of the 2004 Red Sox.
Oh.
No recollection of the 2004 Red Sox. And it dawned on me because I also noticed, just looking around, how young the demographic was of the people that were there, that a lot of these people are probably kind of new to this a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, the 2018 Patriots, 2018 Red Sox. That was 5 years ago. So if you're like 20, you were 15, like you were in high school when that happened, right? If you're like a college kid now, you were, and then you have to go all the way back to 2016 Pats, 2014 Patriots.
It's the second longest title drought we've had since 1960. It's the longest since 2000.
It showed because the people that were out there were acting like this was the first title they've ever seen.
Right.
And when I really started to think about it, if you're Celtics #1 and you're truly a diehard bleed green teamer, you have to go all the way back to 2008 since the last title. So if you're 20 in 2008, you're Tyler Milliken. You have no recollection of them winning in 2008.
That's wild.
So for a lot of people, I could just tell based off the parade. I was in high school when they won in 2008. You were probably too. I was at that parade. I remember it like it was yesterday. But a lot of people probably weren't even there because they were like 3 years old.
Right.
And that definitely shows from that. Other Boston news. Are you in on the Sox? How about them Red Sox?
Yeah, I'm getting
it?
there. I mean, they're fun. They're fun. We'll see. This is baseball. You go through, peaks and valleys, and they're playing really well right now. I don't want to minimize what they're doing. They're obviously playing incredibly well. And they have a real chance here coming up because they play, I think it's their next 5 or 6 series. They've won against the Yankees, and then the rest are either teams that are just outright bottom feeders or teams in the AL wild card hunt where they can, create some cushion for themselves. Yeah. So really key. It's like 3 weeks here, and that will take us up to mid-July. And then, I'm a big proponent of when it comes to trade deadline, especially if you're a team like the Red Sox, if you're a team that doesn't have as much of a margin for error, don't wait till July 31st. Make the move. You get more. First of all, it's more of a buyer's market earlier on. Second of all, you get more bang for your buck, especially if you're going to trade for a starting pitcher. If you trade for him on July 10th instead of July 31st, that's 3-4 more starts he's going to make for you. And if you bottom out, you just trade him away at the deadline again. So let's see what they do at the deadline. But the players themselves are showing the decision makers that this is a team worth investing in.
They play hard.
Yeah.
They're very athletic. They run the bases extremely well, steal a lot of bases. They play the outfield, I think, pretty well. Or at least Duran and Raffaello, when they're out there, they do.
More so, they're just showing that they're bought in.
Yeah, they're competitors.
More than any sort of X's and O's thing, they're bought in. And that, I know that sounds dumb, but baseball's such a long season.
Yeah.
And in the past, it's a little lesser now that you have more teams making the playoffs, but you could be out of it at this point.
That's my biggest concern with them right now is that they are so young.
Yeah.
And it's a long season. And what happens in August, what happens in early September.
It's all the more reason to invest because you get that jolt, you get that bump when
you just worry that not to cut you off, but you just worry that Duran is one of those he should be an all-star. That's a campaign that we need to all be behind. But is he one of those guys that's going to have a great first half and then sputter out?
I've actually spent some time around Jarren Duran. He was at the Lowell Spinners when I was there.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about Jarren Duran as a competitor.
No,
not at all.
I'm not worried about him as a competitor, but I think he can be streaky as a hitter.
Oh, I mean, they have a bunch of – and that's why I'm not so over the moon. Duran's streaky, Raphael's a streaky hitter. They have some guys. Tyler O'Neill's a streaky hitter and has struggled to stay healthy. So this is what it looks like when it's firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
I don't know how sustainable this is. Maybe they can play, better than the 500 ball they were playing for most of the season before this. But that's where if you add a right-handed bat, especially first baseman, if you add a starting pitcher, even if you add a designated hitter, because the one guy I'm really worried about right now is Yoshida.
Yeah.
If you can add a right-handed bat as a designated hitter or first baseman, if you can add a starting pitcher, it creates a little more margin for error for when those guys do go back and kind of regress to the mean, which nothing against them. It will happen. It's baseball. It's a long season.
I just don't want to
have
hear
guys to carry
because
it.
we've heard this the last couple of years. I don't want to hear that the addition is Tristan Casas.
You're going to hear Tristan Casas, Vaughn Grissom, and they'll call up like Nico Cavadas or they'll call up Brian Motter or somebody.
Yeah, but Tristan Casas was part of the plan. Like, he's on the team.
Right.
So when he comes back, you're really just getting back to level with the fact that he's healthy. So, yeah, I really feel like starting pitching is if they can get – and this goes back to the offseason, which is why I'm still kind of bummed out about the whole situation, is because if they had just paid one of the starters, like it doesn't have to be Yamamoto. I understand that was a whole lot of money.
Right.
But like a Jordan Montgomery, for example, they just paid that guy, and then you would have gotten this season out of Houck. You would have had Brian Bayo, who's streaky as well, up and down, but a solid number 2 pitcher if Houck is a true ace. And then you have Jordan Montgomery as your number 3. Like, now you actually have a rotation. And all they had to do was pay that one guy. What did he get? Like 1 year, $20 million or something like that? And all of this would have felt a lot more real. It would have felt a lot more real. Last thing on the other teams of Boston sports.
Yeah.
An ode to Linus Olmark.
Yeah.
An ode to the goalie hug. It had to be done. I didn't love the return. I hate Korpisalo. I hate that part of the trade. But just like with Dante Scarnecchia and the Patriots offensive line, goalie Bob, there is a chance, and I read a couple of different people's takes on this. I know Ty was pretty adamant that he stinks. Korpisalo, the goalie they got back in the trade. But he was much better 2 years ago than he was last year. And statistically, Ottawa was a terrible defensive team.
Yeah.
So, in theory, if you give him the goalie Bob, you put him in front of a much better structured defensive team, he might be good enough to be Jeremy Swayman's backup, which is, I guess, why he's in the deal.
just where you have some younger goalies, Brandon Bussey, and I forget the name of the other guy, but they have 2 younger goalies who are, in the pipeline and are impressive prospects that they have to clear waivers. So I'd hate to lose one of them because now you're tied to Korpisalo with his money.
Yeah.
We'll see what he becomes. To me, this trade, I don't hate it as much as some people do yet. To me, this trade comes down to what they do with the 25th pick.
Right.
If they hit on the 25th pick, it's a great trade. If not, if you're going to take on money, to me, I would have rather taken on Jacob Chikrin because
my guess is that they couldn't get Jacob Chikrin.
I would have tried. I
feel like that's a no-brainer. You get another left-hand D in the top 4. I don't know how you say no to that.
I would have tried to move another piece. I don't know exactly what their draft picks are, but maybe you throw another pick to try to get Chikrin.
Well, that was the whole thing. They didn't have any picks in the first 3 rounds because they've traded all of them for deadline assets.
Well, throw some. I don't know. I would hate to see them lose one of their younger goalies to waivers because they're tied to Korpisalo, who we suddenly find out isn't fixable.
Yeah.
Because I guess if I read this correctly, the numbers behind his actual numbers. So this is where
the nerd math.
The nerd math.
Yeah, the expected goals and all that
I
stuff.
guess was even worse.
Ugh.
So, you know what then? Maybe he'll be fine. Why am I suddenly believing the nerds?
He's going to figure it out. To me, I agree with you. The 25th pick is big because they didn't have a pick in the first 3 rounds because they've traded all of them for the Tyler Bertuzzis and the Garnet Hathaways of the world and stuff like that over the years, Dmitry Orlov. But the biggest thing I feel like is you have $23 million, $24 million in cap space. It's the first time in a couple of off seasons where they've had real cap space.
Right.
And the only true big contract is going to be Jeremy Swayman. So Jeremy Swayman's probably going to come in at $8 or $9 million. You should have a decent chunk of change to throw at a top 6 forward. So that needs to be the move.
Yeah.
I don't know who it is. Like, if it's Elias Lindholm, it's fine. It's not what we all want. Obviously, I'm looking at Leon Draisaitl in Edmonton, and I guess after the game last night, now granted, he's probably devastated that they just lost Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, so probably not the best barometer, but he was pretty lukewarm about extending and re-signing with the Oilers. So if he comes available, that's a totally different ballgame. He's an $11-12 million player.
Right.
But that to me is the biggest thing is they have this gigantic need, especially if they can make it a center, but just in general, a gigantic need for another top 6 forward.
No, they need a center. I think they need a center specifically.
Yeah. So if they can go out and get that player, then this trade becomes worth it. But I was surprised that they actually took on money like they did. I thought they were going to straight salary dump Linus Olmark. But it seemed like to get the first-round pick, they had to take on.
I think they really wanted that first-round pick. I know
Yeah.
Ty Anderson from 98.5 reported that they were talking to guys at the combine who were in that
range. They must have somebody or a couple
They
guys.
must have a couple guys that they,
Yeah,
Which,
so-
again, if you draft a guy and he becomes a stud, trade looks brilliant. For a goalie,
Yeah.
you were going to lose anyway for nothing. If they blow the pick, you gave away a Vezina winner.
Yeah. Last thing on this, and then we got to wrap it up.
Yep.
The fourth line guy that they got is kind of like a Pat Maroon replacement, it sounds like. And that's not like a nobody. He's going to be a tough grinder.
It reminds me a lot of Connor Wong. Connor Wong was thrown into the Mookie Betts trade, and it was all about, well, Verdugo's this MLB ready, young 20s. He's going to hit for some pop. And then it was Jeter Downs was this top prospect. And, we also got a catcher who was, like, I think barely in the top 20 of the Dodgers system. And look at it now. He was the guy, and he's a borderline all-star. I think this was kind of a throw into the Bruins needed a fourth liner is probably how they got Ottawa to eat 25% instead of more of the contract, or instead of less the contract, but maybe he becomes hockey Connor Wong. We'll see.
Bruins fans are going to like him. Bruins fans love anybody that's willing
but they're not because they don't like this trade.
And grind.
They're not going to like him because they don't like the trade.
It's tough to like trades like this, and we got to wrap. But it's tough to like trades like this because we all loved Linus.
Yep.
So it's tough to trade a guy like Linus Ullmark. We loved the tandem, even though it financially never made any sense. It was just fun. They were fun. They bought into it. The goalie hug was obviously a big part of them winning games. We were not allowed to leave the Bruins game until after the goalie hug when they won when we were there. Like that was the rule.
Right.
So I get it. It's always hard when you trade a fan favorite. It's a little bit like, I know you're going to say it's not like this. It's kind of like Marcus Smart in that sense where it's like, I knew that it was we all kind of knew it was the best basketball move, but at the same time, great Celtic, great Bruin. It is what it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Linus Ullmark was here, like 2 years?
Yeah, well, I think Marcus Smart. So
You're wrong.
Anyways, Bridgestone's the official tire of the New England Patriots, proud to partner with Sullivan Tire, New England's headquarters for quality Bridgestone tires. Visit sullivantire.com to find a location near you. And one last time, easy to drink, easy to enjoy, Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of your New England Patriots. We'll be back next week, probably on Tuesday because of the holiday, and Patriots Unfiltered is coming up in a few minutes.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.